There's a new element that's been added to the equation in the last 3 to 4 years, and that has been a massive propaganda campaign out of Washington and out of the US generally about America's emergence as a new Saudi Arabia through the shale oil and gas revolution, in quotes. There's only one problem with the shale revolution, aside from the fact that the technology necessarily pours millions and millions of gallons of toxic water under the ground, where it, in many cases through the explosions, contaminates the groundwater that people use to drink or to feed their cattle in America. The shale gas is gas that's embedded in shale rock. It's not conventional gas, which exists in large deposits underground. So to get it out, they have to blast their way through horizontal pipes under the ground. They have to blast their way with these toxic chemicals and so forth to free the gas from the rock. Well, initially the production of the gas is dramatically high, but unlike conventional gas, which builds up over a slower period of time and declines over a much longer period of time, shale gas, they found, and this has only become evident in the last 2 years, 2.5 years, when there's enough production data available to document this, shale gas reaches a plateau very early and goes dramatically down, something like 87% in the first 2 years. So in order to keep the gas flows going that you have borrowed bank loans to produce, the companies have to keep drilling new wells and keep pouring new infusions of chemicals into the ground to get more gas out. So it's hugely expensive. And ultimately, they produce so much shale gas at the beginning to keep their relation with the banks intact that they collapse, they cut themselves in their own throat. They collapse the price of natural gas in America, and the companies move instead to shale oil, to get oil out of these shale rocks. Well, in parts of the United States, in North Dakota and Montana and Texas, they've extracted something like an additional 1.3, 1.4 million barrels of oil per day through shale. However, 1.4 million barrels of oil, new oil a day from shale, is not about to make America a new Saudi Arabia, merely a Washington propaganda to try to create an image that America is going to be energy independent. What they're trying to do is promote this shale revolution in countries like China for gas, and in Russia for oil, and Ukraine also. But this is probably the least economical way to find oil and gas, and perhaps one of the more destructive ways. Russian scientists, geophysicists and chemists, beginning in the 50s under military secrecy in the Moscow State University and various geological institutes here in Moscow, developed a methodology to understand how hydrocarbons, oil, gas, coal, are actually formed, what the genesis of hydrocarbons is. And they looked at Western geophysics, geology rather. They studied all the scientific papers from the West, from US and Britain, and began laughing at the lack of any scientific explanation for the genesis of oil and gas. The idea that it came from fossil fuels is ludicrous if you think about it. How many dinosaurs would congregate in Saudi Arabia to create the oil that's been produced in Saudi Arabia in one giant field alone since 1948? You would need, they calculated, to create a dinosaur cube, dead dinosaurs, assuming they transformed pound for pound 100% into oil from dead dinosaurs. The cube would be 19 miles wide, 19 miles high, and 19 miles deep, only for that one giant field in Saudi Arabia. Why don't the dinosaurs roam in other parts of the earth as intensely as that. Well, algae doesn't explain it either, nor do dead leaves or grass. So they began looking for other explanations and came up with a hypothesis which since has been proven rigorously in repeated experiments in the laboratory, that oil originates in the deep core of the earth, a giant oven that's constantly burning, creating methane gas that through high temperature and pressure is forced through the mantle of the earth in tiny cracks or fissures, migration channels, up toward the surface where it's trapped in air pockets or pockets of rock until it can be found. And they developed a radical revolutionary way of mapping just where to look for oil and gas. And the problem is, after the end of the Cold War, Western oil companies in the United States had no interest in having this technology known to the world, because countries like China, that are controlled through their dependency on Western oil, would suddenly become energy independent. There's resistance by Lukoil and some of the Russian companies to develop this because they fear that there would be a glut of oil on the world market and the price of oil would collapse. Well, I think that's short-term thinking on the part of Lukoil. I know this from a Russian geophysicist friend of mine who's involved in the abiotic project, as they call it. But what they found is that oil is constantly being renewed from deep in the earth. So if you drill too fast, that the oil cannot refill at the same rate it's being extracted, then it appears that the field is run dry. If you close it and come back 25 years later, as they've done in Tatarstan very recently, those fields have magically refilled. So what are the dinosaurs doing? Are they reproducing in the afterlife? So there are known technologies to extract what's believed to be thousands, if not millions of years of natural gas and perhaps of petroleum as well, without destroying the environment. For political reasons or geopolitical reasons, that's not being allowed to develop, and the US rather is encouraging China to develop shale gas. Now, where is China's shale gas? It's in Sichuan province, one of the most active earthquake zones in the world, where they had a tragic earthquake back, I believe it was 2008 or 2009. And so to begin drilling for shale gas in Sichuan province, in the earthquake regions where the shale is located, and injecting millions and millions of gallons of water filled with toxic chemicals, not only takes precious water from agriculture and urban uses in Sichuan, but it also creates explosions that have been documented in places. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. We never had an earthquake in Dallas until they began drilling for shale all around the city. And then they began having earthquakes. The same thing in England and other places, in Pennsylvania. So the last thing China needs is shale gas. They have abundant gas, domestic and offshore China, abundant gas, through conventional means if they apply the right technology to find it. The US doesn't, of course, want them to do that. So the shale revolution is a myth created partly by the Wall Street propaganda. It was a great way for Wall Street to make billions and tens of billions of dollars financing this myth, but it is not a solution to the world energy crisis. I understand that Gazprom is going into shale technology simply so that they're aware of what the reality is. I think on one level that's wise, but they shouldn't stake the future of Gazprom on resources from shale gas. And if they study closely the American experience and why the major American energy companies are selling their properties, their shale properties, to foreign investors who are foolish enough to buy it, they're selling it not because it's so good, but because they desperately need money and they know it's not as good as they had hoped at the beginning. Thank you.